Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. But what we need to do in this video is understand if we're going to be seeing any sort of a pattern change away from what we've recently had, because some very important updates kind of happened over the weekend that kind of alluded to a bit of a shift around by middle of the month. And we're still watching these changes carefully, but I'd like to provide some of the meteorological evidence behind why I think there might be a shift coming. So what are we shifting from? Well, the jet stream level winds, since the beginning of April up until this past weekend, have at times more frequently than not favored very strong onshore flow out of the west. We call that zonal flow, really targeting parts of the Pacific Northwest. And the flow would come in and then eject. We've talked about that a lot over the last 6-7 weeks. This is what delivered all of the very wet weather across the northern plains and in the Pacific Northwest, while leaving the south from California to Texas very dry at times. This is the pattern we're looking to see a shift away from. It was largely unblocked across the Pacific, despite at times a big ridge of high pressure in the Bering Sea, and we didn't see a lot of downstream blocking over parts of the Atlantic. Okay, what we end up getting out of it, just looking at the month of May, is shown here. So this is May 1st through June 6th. And again, the jet stream came in here. So you can really see the division, the flow coming in, ejecting north. We saw a lot of precipitation at times also building here in parts of the Mid-South Central Plains area, because we had nothing really blocking the Gulf of Mexico flow either with this particular pattern. Now, a couple places that were missed. We've talked about it quite a bit. The Golden Triangle here in parts of Montana, really influenced by the rain shadow effect. But overall, this particular pattern has been one that's been quite permanent for a while now, fueled by a strengthening La Niña in April and May compared to what we had anticipated, which was it for it to really start to back off at that time. We got to see if we're going to break away from that, because the temperature side of it looks something like this. You know, this strip right in through here on the eastern side of the Cascades is having its coldest, May and early June time period on record. And while we've built in quite a bit of heat south, and a whole lot more is coming for Texas over to Southern California, we've been favoring some more warmer days in the eastern Corn Belt, New England, and parts of the southeast. But we've yet to break away and just truly establish warmer air for the northern plains, getting into the Canadian prairie, and of course for the northwest. And that's why when we look at that GDU map, this is GDU anomalies since from April 1st to June 4th, we just continue to see deficits in the northern plains, parts of the western Corn Belt, getting back to the northwest. This map is a little too early to matter for the northern plains, just because a lot of planting still has to be done here. But it just kind of gives you the overall sense of the pattern that we're attempting to break away from. All right. Now, when you look at one other aspect of this, and I was just sharing this with a group in the Northwest earlier today, I'm amazed to see the effect it's had on cloud cover here. Because when you look at the cumulative downward solar flux anomalies, in other words, how much sunlight gets to the surface, we have some places here due to clouds that in the Northwest are sitting at greater than 5,000 GDU deficit. Roughly speaking, that's like not having the sun come out for about 4 to 5 days during the last 30 days. That's how much cloud cover has suppressed letting visible light down to the surface. Look at how also cloudy it's been here in parts of Manitoba, getting over to Ontario, and even into Quebec. So just keeping all of this in perspective, let's come back to the moisture side of this. And I'm going to show you again the drought monitor from last week. So when we look at this particular map, again, what we're concerned about, what I'm very concerned about, is the expansion of drought back into this region. I'd like to make a case for why that could meteorologically happen and what's preventing it here in the near term. Okay, we're going to get to that. But I do want to show you, if you ever come to this site, check out all of these tabs, but go to the Maps tab, go down to Change Maps, and if we just look back over the last month, we do see substantial improvement throughout the plains as of late. And what this is doing is this is prolonging the risk time period of when drought is going to become an issue for when these crops are going through their vegetative stages and into their reproductive stages. And I'm specifically thinking about corn and soybeans when making that statement here in the midsection of the country. Okay, remember this. At the end of May, the Climate Prediction Center, CPC, did release their seasonal drought outlook, released May 31st for June through August. And one of the more important things we noted on that was they were predicting an active southwest monsoon. See that here? They were predicting possibly the expansion of drought into the western Corn Belt and the permanence of drought in the western and then in the high plains. So when we were watching this, we know that we needed to be keeping very close tabs on what was happening with our soil moisture. And as of late, there's been rain here. And there's storms coming through this area today. We've seen a few pockets in the eastern and central Corn Belt that have shown up drier, and we have places over in North Carolina that missed out on some of those weekend rains that have been drier. Same thing for parts of New England. But in the Northwest, saturated soils, and we're just keeping a very close eye on how this map is going to be shifting. Now, with that in the back of your mind, let's talk about the West first, because I'm watching these two systems that are just off the coast, and they are just plowing ahead on the nearly zonal flow in the jet stream. The first one comes in, it's weaker. It's the second one and all the moisture to the south of it that we're watching this weekend just come diving in to the Pacific Northwest, which means the pattern we've been in, these strong zonal winds, there you go, you see them right in through here. They're at least going to continue for the next 7+ days. But we've started to see in some of the longer range forecasts that we're going to be moving away from the extended jet in the Pacific toward a poleward shift and maybe even a little bit of a retraction. So you see the forecast has taken this in this direction. Now, what would be very unnerving, especially if you're in the central United States, is to see a big shift right over into this area. And what that means is the jet would weaken and retract back toward Japan and shift north, taking heat with it. All right. What do we see right now? I'm just going to let's do this. Latest 12Z forecast, we're still in the extended jet all the way through this week. See it there? But what you saw when I came to this slide is that when you get out here past the next week, so this is next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we start to see that past the middle of the month, some breaks in this flow, showing up in a very robust way. I've now seen this for 4 straight days in the models, okay? Suggesting that we could be forming 1, 2, in a split flow pattern, but probably a third ridge here. Now, when we think about that particular pattern, the triple ridge pattern, so the first high is there, the second one is in the plains, and the third one is just to the east of Bermuda. That particular setup later in the season is one that, it's a textbook example of how drought develops in the Midwest. So what I'm trying to tell you is, yeah, we're seeing it come about middle of the month. The question is, does it get stuck there? Are we going to continue to see it? And I think in order to answer that question, we need to assess what is happening in the tropics. I think our strongest teleconnections are still coming out of the tropics. And the first piece is going to be the MJO. The MJO has been on the move a lot lately. We've talked a lot about it. What I'm going to tell you is phase 7, 8, and 1 are the ones I want to be on the lookout for, especially phases 8 and 1, where it's currently in right now. Now, there's a lot of research being done to study the lag in the timing of when the MJO goes to a certain phase and what happens elsewhere around the world. But if we just look at some straight up correlations, why I worry about phase 8 and 1, which are over by Africa, by the way, is because historically, when there is a La Niña, in July, phase 8 tends to give us a ridge here, ridging there, and ridge there, that triple ridge. And you see the troughs that anchor against the shore? So what ends up happening is the flow gets blocked up here, runs up over a weak ridge there, and then dives again. So this tends to keep the coasts wetter and cooler, and the central United States hotter. So that's one part of the pattern we have to watch out for. Same thing if we go to phase 1. We still get more troughing in the west, so the flow comes around, and then it's really weak across the midsection of the U.S. Either of these two patterns are MJO signals I want to be watching in July, and I want you to watch them with me. The thing about it is they're actually more commonly found when there is a La Niña. Now, our La Niña, as we've been discussing, has started to show signs of fading in May. It's still very much here and strong compared to other Mays, but it is fading. Ocean temperatures out here in what we call Niña region 3.4, roughly inside that box, have been warming since late May. See it here? It's still well outside of the what we'd call the ENSO neutral range. It's down there below 0.5 degrees Celsius below average, and that's a large deviation. But what we need to be on the lookout for is if it continues to creep up. The atmosphere isn't giving us those signs just yet. And what I mean is the Southern Oscillation Index is still at a value of almost 19. And as we've been talking about, this is a measure of the trade wind strength between Tahiti and Darwin out in the Pacific. It's been around for centuries. We've been using this. And we know that the positive values relate to La Niña. So it's still up here. And you can see in the graph, it's not fading. And then you look over there at the Hofmüller diagrams too. I don't know if I brought one. Yeah, here's a Hofmüller. You still see stronger trades right here. See that? So that just indicates to us that this La Niña is still there. And I showed you last Thursday, that if this continues, and I look historically for July to September, for some of those big La Niña years, and even some more moderate strength, which is what we consider this one, that the risk goes up for being hotter and drier in the midsection of the country, not on the coasts. Now, this is not a forecast. This is a historical composite. We're just looking to get a clue from history on what summer might hold once we break through to it. And we might be seeing a breakthrough to a summer pattern as soon as about 10 to 12 days from now. So keep that in the back of your mind, because what was released this afternoon, the new European weeklies, the June 16 to July 16 pattern went drier here. And I think a lot of that was because the models were favoring flow coming in and over a ridge, probably anchored here, and then giving us northwest flow and a lot of storms where I'm kind of drawing these lines. They're also keeping the Bermuda high over Bermuda and funneling in moisture like this. But this particular area will likely produce at times higher pressure, more ridging, and what that does is that tends to just limit the return of Gulf moisture pretty far to the north because the flow around a high is generally like this. This does not mean it will be dry every day here. We'll have storms in this area, but it's showing drier, which is why it was so important to bring in all that moisture into this area as of late. Another indicator, look at the strength of the southwestern monsoon pulling into the Four Corners states. That tells me that there's got to be some heat coming into this particular region. And we've seen that. Go take a look at the temperature forecast over that same time period, mid-June to mid-July. And the models have gone more aggressively over warmer through this area. So this just presents that risk again. Is my confidence high? It's not. I've got to see these things take place. I've got to see the MJO going and favoring phases 8 and 1. I've got to see the La Nina influencing that. I've also got to see the Pacific Jet slow down and break up as the models have advertised. So those are the pieces that have to come together. But there's more to the story than just this. That La Nina, as you go out here from June into July and August, seems to persist, but it does have more of a southern hemisphere look to it. Okay? We still see cold water off the Baja. The big question mark is, do we fill this in with warmer water? There's been some indications as of late that that's been occurring. If you just take a look, we've now see some more warmer water encroaching. It's warmer here in the Gulf of Alaska, but this area just off the northwest coast has remained cold, and certainly the extension off the Baja, this is the Pacific Meridional Mode area down here, is still quite cold. So there's some unknowns, but the models are suggesting that through June, July, August, September, that same ocean temperature pattern plus the negative phase of the Indian Ocean dipole, negative phase here, will be present. And we still see some warmer water in the in the main development region, Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico, which is why we continue on with our concern about the above average hurricane season. But if we take this back to the United States, flip it over to a precipitation anomaly for July, August, and September, the models have continued to show this area favoring drier conditions. What you can't do with this is you can't look at the magnitude. We only look at the pattern. And again, it suggests active southwest monsoon. That tells me more ridging happening here. What I would tell you is, I'll kind of circle it and shade it in. This area will likely see a lot of northwest flow and thunderstorms. It's just how far back to the west of that do we start to see the drought risk really develop and become a problem. I think the main story here is with this new data and new forecast information, I cannot yet remove the risk I've been communicating about the possibility of drought developing. That's it. That's the main story behind this. The temperature side of it, you're not going to see anything that's too alarming here. It doesn't look like it's overly warm, but it tells me what that pattern may look like. You see that kind of encompassing here the warmest conditions. And therefore, I'm going to have to watch that all very carefully. Can I give you a quick trip around the world? Let's actually just blow this out to an equatorial view, and let's go back to the precipitation side of this. We'll look at July, August, September. Notice much of southern Europe, it's already been dry in France. It's been dry in the Iberian Peninsula. That's where Spain is and Portugal is. It's been dry through Italy, and we've seen drier conditions in Ukraine in the month of May. But you notice that the models, I know it's kind of a smaller view, but it is drier. In fact, let's just blow it up. We see the drier conditions still forecast, kind of splitting Europe north-south. Let's go from there over to Australia. Let's go south of the equator. La Nina patterns just tend to make it very wet through winter in Australia, and they continue to see the above average precipitation in their forecast. From here, why don't we go over to Asia? We're watching the the Indian monsoon advance over the next 4 to 6 weeks. It'll make it all the way to Pakistan. Nearly every long-range model is forecasting above average precipitation for India. Same thing for the Manchurian Plain and the North China Plain. Those are two big areas of major crop growth. We have a lot of crops that are grown in the south of China as well, but I just tend to focus a lot on the North China Plain and the Manchurian Plain due to the presence of corn and beans, which is just something I tend to focus on there. So I wanted to give you that world tour here of what the new model run said. And the Europeans always first out with the data. We'll get new stuff later on this week and next week too from other modeling agencies, but that's what we're watching. One last thing to point out, the newest forecast for that Niño region 3.4 sea surface temperature anomalies continues to maintain, if you just take an average, temperatures about, a third to a half degree Celsius below normal, getting all the way to December, consistent with some of the other analysis we did. We at this point do not see any evidence of just breakaway El Nino conditions by next winter. That of course could change, but at this point there's no evidence that that's going to be the case, which means a third full year of La Nina seems to be in the works. All right, so that gets us up to speed with the long range. Let's now come back to what we've recently seen. We've got this stalled out boundary that's sitting here, and there's a feed of moisture coming in this direction. So the storms are running on that boundary, and over the weekend, heavy rain in the northwest. Brought in some much needed rain into parts of Montana, although we missed pockets of that golden triangle. And storms, hailers, big time hail coming through here over the weekend. And also we had Alex, and Alex dumped in parts of Florida, southern Florida, between 2 and 10 inches of rain, some places even higher than that. So this just kind of tells us where we've recently been. Now, just thinking about what the wind field looks like today, this is this evening. So we got a low that's curling up here. This is upper level wind, by the way, curling up here, 850 winds, so about a mile above our heads over Lake Superior. And given that it is June 6th when I'm recording this, a very important day in history. This, of course, was when stormed the beaches of Normandy. I thought you might find this interesting. You see wherever we have these regions where the air masses are colliding, so they're kind of coming in like this and like that. Where they meet, we call those fronts. The reason why we call them fronts is that's a tribute to World War II, because during World War II, when we were collecting weather information, which one of the most important forecasts in world history was on June 6th on the Normandy landings, okay? When we saw that the air masses were coming together, and every time they came together, air rose and created precipitation, we just used the same term we were using in battle, a front, to define that. So I thought you might find that little bit of history interesting. But what it's doing today is this. There's the sun trying to set along the east coast, and you can see just storms exploding on the front coming through here, and also kind of pulled into the low that's up there going over Lake Superior. So that's what we're watching right now, and a lot of these storms are really cranking out some lightning this afternoon. Right here along the boundary, and then into the low coming through parts of Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and then stretching back down to Florida, where I'm sure they don't want another drop of rain right now. Storm Prediction Center is keeping an eye on those boundaries right in through here today and into tonight. So as we get into tomorrow on Tuesday, the focus is going to go right here in parts of Nebraska and Kansas. But broadly speaking, this whole region here could see some strong to severe storms tomorrow on the 7th. Getting into day 3, we need to watch this carefully just to see as that boundary sags a little bit farther to the south, what happens back in the high plains and western plains here of Texas, getting to Mexico, and then right here through this part of the mid-south. To show it all to you, though, let's go out and watch the high-res NAM model. So through this evening, large complexes of storms rolling through Kentucky, Tennessee, but coming into northern Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, and then building back on that line. So you're going to see, we're going to watch here in the overnight hours. Remember, that was what we're going to keep an eye on. Going into tomorrow morning, the shield of precip moves forward with the frontal boundary. And then we're going to see later in the day, watch this 6-7 p.m. Remember, we're watching this area carefully tomorrow. Now by Tuesday night into Wednesday, the first of those big systems I showed you earlier is starting to come into the northwest. Still complexes of storms, just kind of rolling through this area, pulled into that low. And that's been really well forecast by the models. So going out through Wednesday afternoon, look at that again, Eastern Corn Belt, another round of storms, and they stretch all the way back through the Mid-South into Texas. From there, I just want to point out the performance of the models again. We continue to see the European outperforming the GFS, but there's value in looking at both of them, which is what we're going to do. So let's play it forward. Here we go. Monday, we've already seen this, getting out into Tuesday and Wednesday. So now we're caught up with the high-res model and playing forward through the rest of the week. More complexes of thunderstorms coming down that same boundary, while the big push of moisture comes in late this week into the Pacific Northwest. Now, as we get out there toward the weekend, did you see that? Here's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We get kind of our last gathering of moisture that kind of comes in and sweeps into New England as the pattern starts to shift up a little bit. You see all the action returns back to the northwest by the time we get out a week from now, and that's going to signal the pattern shift toward ridging mid-month. So when you look at all of that, can I at least just show you what the European model is stitching together? Here's today through Wednesday. Complexes of storms all riding that same boundary curling up into that low, okay? Then we see, going into the weekend, the shift taking place here, and that's where we got to have a conversation. Because over the next 7 days, this is where we have the best chance at getting at least an inch of rain. But if I start to include day 8, 9, 10, 11, do you see how it builds north? We know why that is. Because at that point, the ridge starts to come in, the storms roll over the ridge, and that increases the chances of rain, which is why the full week 2 forecast is now drier in through here and wetter north. That's the pattern adjusting. To finish this up, on the temperature side of it, we've already seen these high temperatures today. Excessive heat warnings in Texas struggle to get out of the 50s in the northern plains. So Tuesday into Wednesday, heat builds west, cooler air in the central United States to New England. Great Basin goes deep into the 90s, triple digit in California's Central Valley and in Texas by Friday. But then the pattern begins to shift, bringing that heat closer to the center part of the country into early next week. And if we watch kind of a 5-day sliding window, you'll see it here. Moving out there day 5 through 10, see the trough coming in the northwest, see the heat recovering in the midsection of the country, and it gets established under that ridge. And that is what we're going to need to be keeping a very close eye on for the next 12 weeks. If something like this continues, that is what would rebuild the risk of drought that we've seen so many agencies discuss as a possibility of occurring. And I want to keep you aware of it and see if it's going to shift around at all, because I think it's going to be very important for the size of the crops grown in the United States. It's from coast to coast what this pattern will impact. We'll keep an eye on it. We'll report back again on Thursday. Have a good one. Thank you.